She left as royalty. She returned as a mother to 2 human children. The great crystal spires of Velnathi Prime sparkled in the morning light as Princess Veltara's ship descended toward the royal landing platform. 7 years had passed since she had left on her diplomatic mission. 7 long years of silence, of worry, of unanswered questions. Emperor Calvin stood at the platform's edge, his tall, elegant form draped in ceremonial robes that shimmered like starlight. His crystalline features, the mark of their ancient bloodline, caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the polished floor. Behind him, the entire royal court waited in perfect formation. "At last," whispered Chancellor Mordan, his telepathic voice touching the minds of all present. "Our lost princess returns." The ship's doors hissed open, steam rolled out, and then a figure appeared in the doorway. It was Veltara, but something was different. Her once bright blue crystalline skin now held warmer tones of purple and gold. Her formal robes were gone, replaced by simple, practical clothing that looked almost primitive. But that was not what made the court gasp in shock. Beside her stood 2 small beings, humans, children. The boy looked about 8 years old, with dark hair and curious brown eyes. He wore clothes that were clearly not made for their world. Fabric instead of living crystal, dull colors instead of shifting light. The girl was younger, maybe 6, with lighter hair that caught the sun like spun gold. She held Veltara's hand, tightly, her wide blue eyes taking in everything around her. "Father," Veltara said, her voice carrying across the platform without telepathy. She spoke aloud, like the humans did. "I have returned." Emperor Calvin's mind reeled. He had prepared speeches, ceremonies, questions about where she had been. He had not prepared for this. "Veltara," he said slowly, his telepathic voice trembling. What are these creatures?" The princess, no, she carried herself differently now, less like royalty and more like something else, smiled. It was a warm expression, softer than the careful smiles of court protocol. "These are my children," she said simply, "Marcus and Luna. I have adopted them." The court exploded in telepathic chatter, hundreds of minds sharing shock and confusion in the space of a heartbeat. Children? Human children? But humans were barely civilized. They lived such short lives, had no telepathic abilities, could not even share thoughts properly. They were lesser beings. Chancellor Mordan stepped forward, his ancient features twisted in concern. "Your Highness, surely you do not mean—" "I mean exactly what I said," Veltara interrupted. "They are my children now. I am their mother." The boy, Marcus, looked up at all the tall, glowing figures around him. He did not seem afraid, just curious. He tugged on Veltara's hand. "Mom," he said in his small, clear voice, "why does everyone look so sad? Aren't they supposed to be happy that you came home?" The simple question cut through 7 years of royal protocol like a blade through silk. Why indeed did they look sad? They should be celebrating. Instead, they stared at the children like they were some kind of disease. Emperor Calvin struggled to find words. In all his centuries of rule, nothing had prepared him for this moment. His daughter, his heir, had returned with alien offspring and seemed to think this was perfectly normal. "Veltara," he said carefully, "we need to speak. Privately." "Of course," she nodded. "But Marcus and Luna stay with me. They do not know anyone else here yet." The girl, Luna, had been silent until now. She looked around at all the crystalline faces, then up at Veltara with concern. "Are they angry with us?" she whispered, though her voice carried in the silent court. "No, sweetheart," Veltara said gently, kneeling down to Luna's level. "They are just surprised. They have never met humans before. But you told us humans and Velnathi were friends, Marcus said, confusion clear in his voice. They are, Veltara replied, though her eyes flickered toward the court. Sometimes it just takes time for friends to understand each other. Lord Commander Zekron, the Emperor's brother, stepped from the crowd. His crystalline features were harder than the others, more angular, and his telepathic presence felt cold. Sister child, he said aloud, using the old formal address. You have been gone long. Perhaps the journey has affected your judgment. Marcus looked at the imposing figure and frowned. That's not very nice, he said. Saying someone's judgment is bad just because they love their kids. The court fell silent. A human child had just criticized a Lord Commander. Zekron's crystalline features darkened. The creature speaks without permission, he said. He speaks because he has thoughts worth sharing, Veltara replied, standing protectively in front of Marcus. Something we seem to have forgotten in all our ceremony and protocol. Emperor Calvin watched this exchange with growing alarm. His daughter was defending the humans. More than that, she was acting like them, emotional, unpredictable, warm. What had happened to her during those 7 years? Come, he said finally. We will go to the private chambers. There is much to discuss. As they walked through the crystal corridors of the palace, the children looked around in wonder. Everything was beautiful but strange. Walls that glowed with inner light, floors that showed reflections of other times, servants who moved without, speaking aloud. It's like a fairy tale, Luna whispered to Marcus. Yeah, but not the fun kind, Marcus whispered back. More like the one where everyone's under a spell. Veltara heard them and smiled sadly. They were not wrong. The court did seem under a spell. The spell of tradition, of believing that their way was the only way, of thinking that different meant lesser. In the private chambers, Emperor Calvin finally asked the question that burned in every mind present. Where have you been, daughter? And why have you brought these humans to our world? Veltara looked at Marcus and Luna, who sat quietly on the crystal chairs that adjusted to their smaller forms. They trusted her completely, even in this strange place surrounded by beings who clearly did not welcome them. I have been learning, Father, she said, learning what it means to be truly alive, and these children, they saved me in ways you cannot imagine. Humans cannot save anything, Zekron said coldly. They are short-lived, weak, primitive. They are brave. Veltara cut him off. They are kind. They are strong in ways we have forgotten how to be. Marcus looked up at her with shining eyes. You saved us too, Mom. When we had nobody left, you became our family. The simple words hit the royal court like a thunderbolt. Family. Not duty, not protocol, not political alliance. Family. Emperor Calvin stared at his daughter and saw a stranger. But as he watched her with the human children, he also saw something else. A happiness he had never seen before, a completeness that had been missing from her perfectly trained, royal life. The question now was, what price would they all pay for? This unexpected transformation, the court would have answers. But first, they would have to decide if they were ready to hear them. 3 days had passed since Veltara's return, and the palace buzzed with whispered conversations. The High Council had been called into emergency session. Ancient laws were being read and debated, and through it all, 2 human children played. In the royal gardens, unaware that their very presence was shaking the foundations of an empire. Marcus chased Luna through the crystal flowers, their laughter echoing off the palace walls. The flowers responded to their joy, glowing brighter and changing colors. Even the palace seemed to like them, though most of its inhabitants did not. Emperor Calvin watched from his window as Chancellor Mordaunt entered his chambers, carrying ancient scrolls and looking deeply troubled. The council grows more concerned each day, Morden said, his telepathic voice heavy with worry. They demand answers about the children, about what happened to the princess during her absence. And what answers do we have? The Emperor replied. Only what she has told us. And that is difficult to accept. Through careful questioning over the past 3 days, Veltara's story had slowly emerged. It was not what anyone had expected. 7 years ago, her diplomatic ship had suffered a catastrophic failure near a small blue planet called Earth. The ship had crashed in a remote area, and Veltara had been badly injured. Her crystalline body had been cracked, her telepathic abilities damaged. She should have died. Instead, she had been found by 2 humans, Dr. Sarah Chen, a scientist who studied alien life, and her husband David, a doctor who helped sick children. They had brought the broken princess to their home and nursed her back to health. For 3 months, I could not even speak their language properly, Veltara had explained. I was helpless, like a child. But they cared for me anyway. They asked for nothing in return. The royal court found this hard to believe. Humans helping without reward? Impossible. They must have wanted something, technology, knowledge, power. But Veltara insisted it was simple kindness. They had been caring. For Marcus and Luna, too, she had continued. The children's parents had died in a war. Sarah and David took them in, gave them a home, loved them as their own. Now, in his chambers, Emperor Calvin tried to understand how his daughter had changed so completely. What happened next? He asked Mordan, though they both knew the story. The attack, Mordan said quietly. The humans call it terrorism. A group of extremists targeted a children's hospital. Dr. Chen and her husband were there, helping injured civilians. The attack had been sudden and brutal. A building full of innocent people, including many children, had been bombed. In the chaos that followed, Sarah and David could have escaped. They could have saved themselves. Instead, they had run back into the burning building again and again, carrying out injured children. They had saved 17 lives before the building collapsed on them. Their last words, according to witnesses, were instructions to make sure Marcus and Luna were safe. They died for strangers' children, Veltara had said, tears flowing down her crystalline face. They gave their lives so others could live. How could I abandon the children they loved so much? Lord Commander Zekron had scoffed at this story. Emotional thinking, he had declared. Humans act on impulse, not logic. The princess has been infected by their primitive ways. But Emperor Calvin was not so sure. He had seen the way Marcus and Luna looked at Veltara, with complete trust and love. He had seen how she looked at them, like they were the most precious things in the universe. Was this infection or something else? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Veltara entered, followed by the 2 children. Marcus carried a crystal flower that had somehow shaped itself into a toy spaceship. Luna held a small creature made of living light that the palace gardens had created for her. Father, Veltara said, we need to talk about what happens next. Indeed we do, Emperor Calvin replied. The council is meeting in 1 hour. They have concerns. Marcus looked up from his crystal toy. Are they still upset about us being here? Some of them are, the Emperor admitted. He found it strange how easy it was to talk to the human child. The boy listened carefully and asked thoughtful questions, unlike many adult courtiers. Why? Luna asked. We're not hurting anyone. It's complicated, Veltara said gently. Some people think that different means bad. That's silly, Marcus said. Different just means different. Like how some flowers are blue and some are red, but they're all pretty. Emperor Calvin blinked. In one simple sentence, the human child had explained something that philosophers had debated for centuries. Father, Veltara said, I know, My bringing Marcus and Luna here has caused problems, but I will not abandon them. They are my children now. The succession laws, he began. Can be changed, she interrupted. Laws serve people, not the other way around. Before he could respond, Chancellor Mordan burst into the room, his crystalline features pale with worry. Your Majesty, he said, Lord Commander Zekron has called for an immediate council vote. He claims the princess is no longer fit to inherit the throne. Veltara's face hardened. On what grounds? Mental contamination by prolonged contact with inferior species, Mordan said reluctantly. He says the humans have made you unstable. Marcus and Luna looked confused and hurt. They did not understand all the words, but they understood the tone. Someone was saying they were bad for their mom. That's not true, Luna said quietly. Mama is the best person in the whole universe. Yes, Marcus added firmly. She saved us when we had nobody. She's brave and kind and smart. If anything, we made her better, not worse. Emperor Calvin stared at the children. They spoke with such certainty, such faith. When was the last time anyone in his court had spoken about him with such pure love and admiration? What does Uncle Zekron want? Veltara asked. He demands that you give up the human children immediately, Mordan said. Send them back to their own kind, then undergo purification rituals to cleanse your mind of human influence. Only then would the council consider you fit to rule. Never, Veltara said without hesitation. I will not abandon my children. Then you will lose the throne, Mordan warned. The ancient laws are clear. A ruler contaminated by lesser species cannot lead the Velnathi people. Maybe the ancient laws are wrong, Marcus said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. I mean, if a law says that loving someone makes you a bad person, then maybe it's the law that's bad, not the person. The simple logic hit the room like a thunderbolt. Emperor Calvin felt something shift in his mind, a crack in the wall, of tradition that had surrounded his thinking for centuries. The boy has a point, he said slowly. When did we decide that love was a weakness instead of a strength? Zekron's voice suddenly echoed through the room via telepathy, addressing the entire palace. Citizens of Velnathi Prime, gather in the Great Hall. The future of our realm will be decided today. Veltara knelt down and hugged Marcus and Luna, close. Whatever happens, she told them, remember that you are loved. Remember that Sarah and David would be proud of how brave you've been. We're not scared, Marcus said, though his voice trembled slightly. We have you. And we have each other, Luna added. As they walked toward the Great Hall, Emperor Calvin found himself thinking about sacrifice, about love, about what it truly meant to be strong. The human children had already changed his daughter. Now perhaps it was time for them to change an entire empire. But first, they would have to survive what was waiting for them in the Great Hall. The Great Hall fell silent as Lord Commander Zekron raised his hand. Hundreds of Velnathi had gathered to witness what many believed would be the end of Princess Veltara's claim to the throne. The crystalline walls reflected their glowing forms, creating a sea of light that should have been beautiful but felt cold and harsh. Marcus and Luna stood close to Veltara, their small human forms dwarfed by the towering aliens around them. They did not understand all the formal words being spoken, but they could feel the anger and fear in the room. Citizens of the realm, Zekron announced, his voice carrying both telepathically and aloud. We face a crisis that threatens our very identity. Our princess has been corrupted by contact with primitive beings. She claims these humans are her children. But I say they are poison that will weaken our entire race. A murmur of agreement rippled through the older council members. But Emperor Calvin noticed that the younger Velnathi seemed less certain. their crystalline features flickering with doubt. However, Zekron continued, we are a fair people. Before we pass judgment, we will test these creatures. We will see if they possess even the smallest spark of intelligence worthy of our consideration. Veltara stepped forward. What kind of test? The trials of understanding, Zekron said with a cold smile. The same tests we give to our own children to determine their place in society. Surely, if these humans are truly worthy of royal protection, they can pass tests meant for Velnathi younglings. It was a trap, and everyone knew it. Velnathi children had telepathic abilities from birth, could share thoughts directly, and had access to the collective knowledge of their people. Human children had none of these advantages. That's not fair, Marcus said quietly, but his voice carried in the silent hall. We're different. It's like asking a fish to climb a tree. Several younger Velnathi exchanged glances. The human child had a point. Afraid? Zekron taunted. Then perhaps you admit your inadequacy? Marcus looked up at Veltara, who nodded encouragingly. We'll try, he said simply. But if we fail, it doesn't mean we're bad. It just means we're different. The first test was strategic thinking. A complex holographic display showed a war scenario, enemy ships attacking from multiple directions, limited resources, impossible odds. Young Velnathi typically solved this through shared consciousness, combining their minds to process vast amounts of information instantly. Marcus studied the display quietly while Luna watched beside him. The council waited for them to fail, to prove their primitive nature. Then Marcus began to speak. The enemy expects you to fight all of them at once, he said, pointing to the hologram. But look, they're spread too thin here and here. If you fake a retreat toward this asteroid field, they'll chase you and break formation. Then you can pick them off one group at a time. The strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to process everything at once like the Velnathi, Marcus had found patterns, used the enemy's assumptions against them. The war simulation played out his strategy. It worked perfectly. The hall buzzed with surprised telepathic chatter. How had a primitive human child seen what their best military minds had missed? Lucky guess, Zekron said dismissively. The next test will be more challenging. The second trial involved emotional understanding, reading the needs of different people and finding ways to help them. It was meant to test telepathic empathy, the ability to share feelings directly with others. Luna stepped forward for this. The test showed her holographic people in distress, some angry, some sad, some afraid. Without telepathy, she should have been helpless. Instead, Luna watched carefully. She noticed how they stood, how they moved, the expressions on their faces. That one is angry, but really he's scared underneath, she said, pointing to a figure. He needs someone to listen to him and make him feel safe. And she looks sad, but see how she keeps touching her arm? She's hurt and trying to hide it. She needs medical help and kindness. One by one, Luna identified what each person needed, not through telepathy, but through careful observation and intuition. Her solutions were simple but effective, sometimes just listening, sometimes offering help, sometimes knowing when to give someone space. The younger Velnathi stared in amazement. They had telepathy but often struggled to truly understand emotions. This human child, with nothing but her eyes and heart, saw deeper than many of them ever had. Impressive, admitted Counselor Yelana, one of the younger members. But surely, enough, Zekron interrupted. These tricks prove nothing. The children may have some small cunning, but they remain a corrupting influence. Watch what happens when they face real Velnathi culture. The third test was the most dangerous. It involved exposure to the resonance chamber, a room filled with pure telepathic energy that should overwhelm non-telepathic minds. Young Velnathi used it to learn control, but for humans, it could be deadly. No, Veltara said firmly. I Will not risk their lives for your prejudice." "Then you admit they are weak," Zekran said. "Unworthy of royal protection." Marcus tugged on Veltara's hand. "Mom, what's he talking about?" She knelt down and explained the chamber, how it was filled with mental energy that could hurt people who weren't prepared for it. "Will it hurt you if you come with us?" Luna asked. "No, sweetheart. I have telepathic abilities. I'll be fine." "Then we want to try," Marcus said. "You'll protect us and we trust you." Against her better judgment, Veltara agreed. They entered the resonance chamber together, the children holding her hands tightly. The chamber filled with swirling telepathic energy. The Velnathi expected the human children to collapse, to prove their mental weakness. Instead, something extraordinary happened. Marcus and Luna didn't fight the energy. They adapted to it. Where Velnathi minds were rigid and structured, human minds were flexible and creative. The telepathic energy flowed around them like water around stones, and they began to use it in ways no one had ever seen. Marcus started organizing the chaotic mental energy into patterns, creating new pathways for thought. Luna began translating the emotional undertones hidden in telepathic communication, making them visible to everyone present. The chamber, designed to test and train, became a bridge between species. For the first time, Velnathi in the room could feel what the human children felt. Their love for Veltara, their sadness at being unwanted, their hope for acceptance. But they also felt something else, pure, unconditional love from two children who had lost everything but refused to give up on the family they had found. The session ended with the entire chamber in stunned silence. Several of the younger Velnathi were crying. Actual tears, something their species rarely showed. "Remarkable," whispered Counselor Yelana. "They're teaching us new ways to think, new ways to feel." Zekran's crystalline features darkened with rage. The children were not failing as he had planned. Instead, they were winning hearts and minds, showing abilities that complemented Velnathi culture rather than corrupting it. That night, as Marcus and Luna slept in their new chambers, Zekran met with his supporters in secret. "They are more dangerous than I thought," he said. "Not because they are weak, but because they are strong in ways we did not expect. They will change our people, make them soft, emotional, human-like." "What do you propose?" asked his lieutenant. "An accident," Zekran said coldly. "Something that looks natural but removes the problem permanently. The princess will grieve, but she will recover. And our way of life will be preserved." Outside their window, the crystal gardens glowed softly in the night. Marcus and Luna slept peacefully, unaware that their greatest test was yet to come. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and for the first time since arriving on Velnathi Prime, their lives would be in real danger. But they had something their enemies did not understand: the strength that comes from being loved and the courage that comes from loving others in return. The morning brought chaos to the Crystal Palace. Emperor Calvin woke to find his guards missing and strange soldiers in their place. Lord Commander Zekran stood in the Emperor's chambers, surrounded by armed supporters. "Uncle, what is the meaning of this?" the Emperor demanded. "I am saving our people," Zekran replied coldly. "You have become weak, influenced by your daughter's madness. The humans must be eliminated, and Veltara must be purified before she destroys our civilization." In another part of the palace, Veltara fought desperately as soldiers tried to separate her from Marcus and Luna. The children clung to her, frightened but trying to be brave. "Mom, what's happening?" Marcus asked as they were forced apart. "Stay strong," Veltara called to them as they were dragged away. "Remember that you are loved. Remember Sarah and David. Remember who you are." The children were taken to the deepest level of the palace, to a chamber that pulsed with intense crystalline light. the Judgment Crystalline, a massive telepathic amplifier that could reach every mind on the planet simultaneously. Zekron arrived with his supporters, his crystalline features cold with determination. "Citizens of Velnathi Prime," his voice echoed telepathically across the world. "Today you will witness the true nature of these human creatures. When exposed to our most sacred crystal, their primitive minds will shatter, proving once and for all that they are unworthy of our consideration." Marcus and Luna stood in the center of the chamber, holding hands. The massive crystal above them began to glow brighter, gathering telepathic energy from across the planet. "I'm scared," Luna whispered. "Me too," Marcus admitted. "But Mom believes in us. And Sarah and David are watching over us. We can do this." The crystal reached full power and released a wave of pure telepathic energy. It should have crushed the children's minds instantly, proving Zekron's point about human weakness. Instead, something incredible happened. The children's minds didn't break. They bent. Like trees in a storm, they swayed with the telepathic wind instead of fighting against it. Their human brains, evolved for survival and adaptation, found ways to work with the alien energy instead of being destroyed by it. Marcus felt the strategic problems of 1,000 Velnathi military commanders flowing through his mind. Instead of being overwhelmed, his brain began sorting and organizing the information, finding patterns and solutions that the telepathic minds had missed. Luna experienced the emotions of an entire planet. Millions of Velnathi struggling with feelings they could share but not truly understand. Her natural empathy began translating these emotions, making them clearer and more meaningful. Across the planet, every Velnathi suddenly experienced something new. Through Marcus, they saw military strategies that were brilliant in their simplicity. Through Luna, they felt emotions with a depth and clarity they had never known. But then something even more extraordinary happened. The children's memories began flowing through the network, not just their own memories, but the memories of the people who had loved them. Every Velnathi on the planet suddenly experienced Sarah Chen's final moments. They felt her terror as the building burned around her, but also her determination as she ran back into the flames. They experienced David's love for his children, as he carried wounded strangers to safety, knowing he might not survive. The entire population felt what it meant to sacrifice everything for others. They experienced human love in its purest form, love that asked for nothing in return, love that gave everything even unto death. The crystal chamber filled with gasps and cries as hardened Velnathi warriors wept for the first time in their lives. They felt the children's grief at losing their adopted parents, but also their gratitude for having been loved so completely. Through Luna's gift for understanding emotions, they experienced Marcus and Luna's journey with Veltara, how a broken princess had found purpose in caring for orphaned children, how children who had lost everything had learned to trust and love again. "Stop this!" Zekron commanded, but his own voice was shaking. Even he was feeling the overwhelming power of human emotion flowing through the network. But the children were not finished. Marcus began showing the Velnathi something else: human resilience. Through his memories, they experienced humanity's long history of surviving impossible odds, of adapting to any challenge, of turning weakness into strength. They saw humans who had built civilizations in deserts, who had crossed oceans in tiny boats, who had reached for the stars despite being bound to a single planet. They felt the human spirit that never gave up, never stopped trying, never stopped hoping. Luna showed them human compassion, how humans cared for the sick, protected the weak, adopted children who were not their own. She showed them how Sarah and David had taken in 2 orphaned children without hesitation, how Veltara had done the same, how love could transcend species and blood. The telepathic network began to change. The rigid patterns of Velnathi thought became more flexible. more creative. The cold efficiency of their shared consciousness became warmer, more understanding. Across the planet, young Velnathi began to question the old ways. Why should different mean inferior? Why should emotion be weakness? Why should love be seen as contamination instead of strength? In the crystal chamber, Zekran's supporters began backing away from him. The experience had changed them. They had felt what the children felt, understood what they offered, not corruption but completion. "You are traitors!" Zekran screamed at his retreating followers. "They are making you weak!" "No," said Commander Yelan, tears streaming down her crystalline face. "They are making us whole." The crystal began to pulse with new rhythms, not just the cold efficiency of Velnathi thought, but the warm chaos of human emotion, the creative flexibility of human adaptation, the unbreakable strength of human love. Marcus and Luna stood in the center of it all, no longer victims, but bridges between worlds. They had not been broken by the test. They had transformed it. Emperor Calvin burst into the chamber with loyal guards, ready to rescue the children. Instead, he found them standing tall and unharmed, surrounded by the most beautiful telepathic patterns he had ever seen. "Uncle," he said to Zekran, "your coup has failed. But more than that, your entire philosophy has been proven wrong. These children are not our weakness. They are our strength." Zekran looked around at his former supporters, all of whom had abandoned him. The telepathic network still pulsed with human warmth and creativity, forever changed by what the children had shared. "This is not over," he snarled, but his words rang hollow. Everyone could feel through the network that it was, indeed, over. The old ways of thinking had died in the crystal chamber, replaced by something new and beautiful. Veltara rushed in and gathered Marcus and Luna in her arms. "Are you hurt?" she asked frantically. "No, Mom," Marcus said with a tired smile. "We're okay, and I think we helped." Around them, the crystal sang with new harmonies. Velnathi logic enhanced by human creativity, telepathic efficiency warmed by human compassion, an entire civilization transformed by the love of two small children who had refused to be broken. The fire of humanity had not destroyed the Velnathi. Instead, it had lit a new path forward, together. 5 years had passed since the day that changed everything. The Crystal Palace gleamed in the morning sun, but it felt different now, warmer, more alive. Laughter echoed through halls that had once been silent with formal protocol. Princess Veltara, now Queen Veltara, stood in her study reviewing the latest reports from across the realm. But these were not the cold, efficient documents of the old regime. These reports spoke of new schools where Velnathi and human children learned together, of medical advances made by combining telepathic healing with human innovation, of art that blended crystalline beauty with human emotion. "Mom, are you ready?" called a voice from the doorway. Veltara looked up to see Marcus, now 13 years old and tall for his age. He wore formal robes that sparkled with living crystal, but his smile was pure human warmth. Beside him stood Luna, 11 years old, with flowers made of light woven into her hair. Gifts from the palace gardens that had learned to love her gentle nature. "Ready for what?" Veltara asked, though she was smiling. "The ceremony," Luna said, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "You said you wouldn't start without us." Today was the 5th anniversary of the Crystalline Awakening, as the Velnathi now called the day when human consciousness had flowed through their telepathic network. It had become the most important holiday in the realm, a celebration of unity, understanding, and the strength found in diversity. But more than that, today marked the opening of the Sarah and David Chen Memorial Institute for Interspecies Understanding. After years of planning and construction, the facility was finally ready to welcome its first students from dozens of different worlds. They walked together through the palace corridors, past walls that now displayed both ancient Velnathi crystals and human artwork sent from Earth. The combination should have looked strange, but instead it felt perfect. Two different forms of beauty enhancing each other. In the throne room, Emperor Calvin waited with a small group of advisors. He had chosen to remain as emperor while Veltara took the title of queen and handled day-to-day governance. At 73, Marcus and Luna still called him Grandpa Cal, a human custom that had initially shocked the court but now seemed perfectly natural. Grandfather, Marcus said formally, then broke into a grin and hugged. The tall Velnathi ruler. Are you coming to the opening ceremony? I wouldn't miss it, Calvin replied, his crystalline features glowing with warmth. The old emperor had changed perhaps more than anyone. Where once he had been distant and formal, he now laughed easily, and spoke as often with his heart as with his mind. Chancellor Mordan approached, carrying a ceremonial scroll. Your Majesty, the final student roster for the Institute. We have applicants from 47 different worlds. Veltara took the scroll and smiled. Sarah and David would be amazed. They saved 2 children, and now their legacy will help thousands. They'd be proud of us, Luna said quietly. All of us. The group made their way to the Institute, a magnificent building that combined Velnathi crystal architecture with human design principles. Gardens surrounded it where plants from dozens of worlds grew together, tended by students who were learning that cooperation could make even impossible things bloom. As they approached the main building, crowds of beings gathered to watch. There were Velnathi, of course, but also humans who had come from Earth. Tall Zentorians with their feathered crests, small Rigelian miners with their tough scaled skin, and many others. Children of all species ran together through the crowd, playing. Games that would have been impossible before the awakening brought different worlds together. Look, Marcus said, pointing to a group of young Velnathi teaching human children how to make crystal flowers sing. Remember when they thought we would corrupt their culture? Now they're teaching our ways to others, Luna observed. Culture isn't something you can break by sharing it, it just gets stronger. At the podium, Veltara looked out over the diverse crowd. 5 years ago, this gathering would have been unthinkable. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Today, we open more than a school, she began, her voice carrying both telepathically and aloud, so all species could understand. We open a door to the future, a future where different does not mean lesser, where diversity is strength, where love transcends the boundaries of species and worlds. She paused, looking at Marcus and Luna standing proudly beside the podium. I once thought I knew what it meant to be royal, what it meant to be strong, what it meant to be civilized. Then, 2 human children taught me that true nobility comes not from bloodline or tradition, but from the courage to love and protect others. True strength comes not from power over others, but from lifting others up. True civilization comes not from forcing everyone to be the same, but from celebrating what each person brings to the greater whole. The crowd erupted in applause, a sound that mixed clapping hands with clicking claws, with crystalline chimes, a symphony of species celebrating together. Marcus stepped forward to speak. 5 years ago, Luna and I were just scared kids who had lost everything. We didn't know if we belonged here, if we would ever have a real home again. But this world, these people, they taught us that home isn't a place. It's the people who love you and choose to stand by you. Luna joined him. Sarah and David Chen taught us that family isn't about blood or species. They showed us that love means being willing to sacrifice for others. Our mom Veltara showed us that courage means standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. And all of you showed us that the universe is big enough for everyone to belong. As the formal ceremony continued, Marcus and Luna found themselves surrounded by young students from many worlds. A shy Zentaurian girl asked Luna to teach her how to braid flowers. A group of Rigelian boys asked Marcus to show them the human game called tag. Soon the formal event had dissolved into something much more beautiful. Children of a dozen species playing together, learning from each other, becoming friends across the vast gulfs of space and difference. Later that evening, as the 3 moons of Velnathi Prime rose over the palace, the royal family sat together in their private garden. Veltara watched Marcus help a young crystal tree learn to grow in spirals, while Luna sang a lullaby that made the flowers glow softly. "Do you ever miss Earth?" Veltara asked them. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to grow up there. But this is our home now. These are our people. And we're helping build something that Sarah and David could never have imagined. A place where no child has to choose between different parts of themselves. Besides," Luna added with a mischievous smile, "Earth doesn't have flowers that sing or gardens that give hugs." "I think we got the better deal," Veltara laughed, a sound that rang like crystal bells across the garden. 5 years ago, she had been a lost princess returning home in disgrace. Now she was a queen, a mother, and part of something larger than any throne or crown. A family that spanned species and worlds, built on the simple human truth that love is always stronger than fear. Above them, the stars shone down on a universe that was a little bit kinder, a little bit wiser, and a little bit more human than it had been before. And in the crystal gardens of Velnathi Prime, 2 human children continued the work their first parents had started, proving that the greatest strength of all is the courage to love without limits. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility, carried forward by the children who had learned that being human wasn't about what species you were born as, but about what you chose to become.